This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Care Notes brought to you from Cherished Companions and Doug Wilber. And I love the conversation you want to have today because,
Good.
you know, whether we are getting older and may need care at some point, or our parents need care, or our neighbors, none of us, I won't say none of us, but a good majority of us have no idea what
Mhm.
it costs for care.
Right.
And we all believe if we go into a facility, everything is covered, which is not.
Right. No, that's a very, very bad assumption, but it's a very common assumption. People are sort of sorely surprised when they realize that it isn't covered unless here's kind of the thing with care. Um, if you need a lot of care, um, and you don't have a lot of money, that gets covered. So, and when I say don't have a lot of money, I mean really are truly indigent. Are on the essentially you qualify for Medicaid.
Right.
Um, if you need some care, kind of like assisted living, generally speaking, very little of that is covered, even when you have um, the Medicaid. Because expectation is that you, as long as you can function, you should be functioning on your own, um, and then the sort of the rest of us are left out in a place where we have to be spending money on our own. And I think one of the things that is really important when it comes to the cost of care is really to view things differently. And that is, you have to view things as far as the value of care. And value is a different way of looking at something than cost. Because if you just look at cost, um, and this isn't kind of like I'm just playing marketing games or
Right.
whatever. That really is not what I'm doing. Is it really is knowing how things are set up. How is it that we get the value out of the dollars that we have?
Right.
And that's part of the purpose, or when I go in and I'm talking to families and doing an intake, is trying to figure out how we can stretch out the finances in order to be able to make this a long-term proposition and to still ensure safety.
Sure.
Um, so that's one of the things I think first and foremost we have to look at is the value proposition. Um, and then, the other thing I believe that's really important is to look at not only value, but how can we be creative in developing a plan that will again stretch and cause the finances to go as far as they possibly can. Because eventually, if you do spend down all your finances, then you could go into a facility and Medicaid will pay for it at that point in time under the particular circumstances. The other thing you have to look at is where can funds come from? And so sometimes people qualify for funds that they don't realize. For example, maybe someone doesn't have a lot of money, but they were a veteran during a wartime period. Doesn't mean that they had to serve on the front line or do anything like that. They just may have at this point in time um, eh, qualify because of the fact that as your income goes down a little bit, there's a benefit out there for veterans that will pay for certain things. So maybe what we could do is just take a little bit of time explore some of these ideas and thoughts. So the first thing is to really look at what the needs are. So if you were to look at this as, and I've used this analogy before, as a dam that has holes in it. And, the idea is to plug the holes. And so the first thing that I think a family needs to do is realize that if they don't plug those holes, the dam is going to burst and something is going to happen that isn't good in those circumstances. And so that I think is one of the critical factors, is figuring out where the problems are, where the issues are. So maybe when you look at it, it's, hey, mom does really, really well, except for if the morning is when she's very busy. So maybe what we do is we come in and in the morning and do care. Now, when I say we, I don't necessarily mean us as a company. It could be family. Could be that you have family that says, look, I will do Monday and I will do Friday. All we need is the other days that where we could do help, or you can get 5 out of the 7 days covered for that. And that's where you might be able to pull in and say, okay, let's use a professional service to come in to do that. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky, is that some of the services like ours have minimum for the week. So you have to hit, a lot of the agencies are saying 20 hours a week now. We aren't doing that. We're just basically looking at need and saying, when is the need? And we're gonna try to figure out a way to help people with it. But the reason they're doing the 20 hours a week, and this is just an aside, is because there is a huge national caregiver shortage right now. And we've talked about this, I think, a few times on the show. But it is horrible. I mean, it really is. We're doing a better job than the majority of the companies that are out there nationwide. I'm kind of hearing the feedback, but it's really, really bad. But that's one of the issues. So some of the companies are saying, look, we're only going to fit in and do for those that are really going to commit to a number of hours, because we're being stretched here and there trying to do it. And we're trying to still make it work for folks. So look at the need and then do that. Why look at the need? As I mentioned before, if you don't do it, it can cause a problem, and then you will really have expenses. So, for example, you have someone that has a need for help in the morning, because if they don't get it, they're trying to do things that really they shouldn't do, and the person falls because they were trying to do something they weren't really capable of doing, and they break a hip. Well, that has opened up a Pandora's box of problems, and really a Pandora's box of costs that'll come in the family. Now, I'm not saying that if you get care that someone will never fall, or you've eliminated all chances of it, but you have probably greatly reduced the chances of falling significantly. And then, one of the other things that'll happen is sometimes people will be coming out of a facility. So let's say they had that fall, they went into a facility, they're coming out, and their needs when they're first coming out are going to be really big. And I'll tell you why they're big. One, they're big because someone is used to someone helping them.
Right.
Two, people always overestimate the ability of the person coming out of the facility. What they will do is they'll project on their parents, or the parents or the person themselves will project and say, look, I was walking before I left the facility, so when I go home, I should be able to do all those things because they're letting me go home. Well, no, that is a really, really bad assumption. And so you have to look at transitioning. And again, that's another point in time where it's really important to say, okay, we're going to pay a little bit more now, but if we can get them strong, we can wean off of that care at home and prevent a bigger problem. So do you see where that's value?
So,
You may be spending more, at a certain point in time, but overall, you're preventing a big problem that will cost you a lot of money in those circumstances. The other thing I think to look at is going to be that when, actual costs. And so the actual costs are there. And one thing I will say is, and we really don't talk about this very much, but we're generally a couple dollars, $2 to $3 less than most of the other agencies. We do not emphasize that. It's just part of our philosophy. We've always tried to make ourselves as affordable as possible. So we as a company, there is a very, a difference, and the difference really is our margins, not on the back of our caregivers. We pay our caregivers well compared to the industry. We offer full benefits and other things. And so I will say this is that less expensive for companies isn't necessarily good unless they happen to take a philosophy like we do, where the margins are the difference, rather than if you have a situation where it's on the backs of the caregiver, you're going to get worse care. There's a lot of other things that will come into play that you have to do. So if someone is less expensive, it really needs to be less expensive because of an emphasis that they have on saving, not that savings has come
right.
from the caregiver's back, because that will not be good for folks. So less expensive can be better, or it might not be, again, depending. And in our case, we believe that it's for the right reasons and in the right circumstances. So, but the value proposition also comes to play. We have different pricing, and a lot of companies have different pricing based on the type of care that you're getting. So we're one of the companies that will do live-in care, and our live-in care is about half the cost of our hourly care. We just work on very narrow margins with that. It's part of our philosophy of trying to keep people in a home setting. And essentially, it's kind of like, the best way I could describe it is it's almost like having a nanny in the home, but the nanny is a professional aide, not someone for kids. It's someone that is doing professional aid work, and in the sense that that person is there 24 hours a day. They do have downtime, during it. They can talk on the phone at times or different things because they're there around the clock, but they're usually basing their breaks, where it's balanced out with the needs of the client. And so that can really bring, in some circumstances, great value. And we have other programs that are kind of like that, where we're able to discount things for our clients and make it affordable. Ultimately, and this is what I think is really important, is ultimately, in almost all circumstances, it's less expensive to be at home because of that creativity, because of figuring out how you can figure out when to place people or creatively place people so that it's less expensive than placing someone into a facility. Whether that facility be an assisted living facility or whether that facility be a some sort of a skilled nursing facility. Um, the skilled nursing facilities especially have grown extremely expensive. I mean, it's not uncommon to be spending over $400 a day to be in skilled nursing at this point in time. And, we can do one-on-one care 24 hours a day for less than that. And so, it's not group care, it's individual care. So you are getting the absolute highest value in those circumstances you can, because I don't care how you cut it, group care does not compare with one-on-one care. And so it's kind of a bonus. You can do that for less than what
And,
you would do.
I think if people, can take a step back and, you know, remember why this is important to stay at home.
Right.
My parents from a very early age on, they would tell us, don't put us in a facility. Um, we're going to both die at home. And I remember my brothers and I looking at them saying, well, that's great, but you have 3 kids who don't even live in town with you. What if you need help? And
Right.
uh, they didn't totally think all that through. Um, and my mother took care of my dad up until he had hospice care. And again, he was able to die at home. And
Right.
really, they kept the cost down. Um, at one point, my brothers and I were telling my mother that he should be in skilled nursing, and my mother said, "He'll die on the way there. At least I can have some extra days with him." And she was right, because on his good days, he was really, really good. Um, and the same thing with my mom. I think when she had her stroke, if we would have taken her directly from the hospital into a skilled care facility, I don't think she would have made it.
Right.
Um, and I'm not saying skilled care isn't good, but you have to make sure that you're in the right one, getting the right care. And as family members, you have to be involved,
Right.
because it's difficult if I'm a skilled nurse and I have 15 people I'm supposed to be taking care of. Um, Somebody's going to slip through the cracks.
Right. Well, the one area that the government does pay for with Medicare dollars is with rehab. And that's actually, of all things that they should, actually is the rehab, because that's where I do believe that the facilities potentially have an edge on home care in most circumstances. And here's why. In the facility, although this last year has been a little bit, maybe not as much as in the past and hopefully in the future, but the when you're in rehab, they have they're able to have like a gym. I mean, quote unquote, all the equipment where they can work on rehabilitating very specific things for more time every day. So that's an important transition when someone is, say, going from the hospital to rehab to home. Those are dollars well spent, because a lot of times that building blocks that you do in that really get you to the point where you can be home, where you can have a lot more safety, and can do things where the need for care can many times diminish significantly because of the fact that you've done you've been able to do this, where you've been able to get someone strong enough that they need less help, and they need our services frequently less than they would have otherwise. So, and fortunately, that is covered by Medicare. I will say, and this is just kind of what I've noticed, the unfortunate thing that's happened recently is a lot of the companies, they're managed care companies now, oftentimes um, now holding on like with the Advantage plans. And they are actually, at least my sort of limited, exposure to it, but they seem to be getting people out of the facilities quicker, but not necessarily, I think, to the benefit of the the client or the patient. It just is happening that they're trying, I think, many are trying to save money, and so they're, pushing people out. And so we're seeing people that are coming out, and the best I can tell, they're really getting them out many days earlier than they used to when it was just traditional Medicare, because it sure seems to be different with the people who've kept the traditional Medicare. And they don't seem to be coming out quite as quickly. And I don't think that's can be chalked up to nursing home greed or something like that. Even then they have to justify why they are keeping someone in. It just seems to be the justification is much better received, in these circumstances where it's the traditional Medicare versus the Advantage type plans.
And it's interesting that you bring that up because the day that I went on Medicare, the following day I fell and I broke my femur. So I had surgery, and I was told right from the hospital I was going to go to a rehab center because the way they had inserted the bar, they said I would not do good going home, having therapy at home, or traveling regularly. So you're right, being in the facility was great because everything was there. Um, However, they wanted to keep me longer than I wanted to be there. And I was helping other patients because I was like running around with my little walker and my cane. Um, but I realized the day that I came home how difficult it really was for me for the given reasons that I had therapy right there almost every single morning at 9 o'clock. I was in therapy and again in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. Well, now I'm home and I'm supposed to do that on my own. It didn't
Right.
go over real well.
Yeah.
And I had a husband and son who were willing to help with meals, but it wasn't their, you know, wasn't in their wheelhouse, so to speak. And
Right.
the facility was probably right. I probably needed an extra week, like they suggested. But being the person that I am, I pushed myself through it and I got through it. But I wouldn't recommend that for anybody else, unless you really have that total support when you go home. Um, you need to take whatever is available and to heal
Right.
properly. Now,
Yeah. Go ahead.
the question
Sorry.
I was going to ask you, have you ever been in a situation where the family calls you in because they really believe mom or dad or both need care, but you come in and do an evaluation and realize that um, mom and dad really don't need the care, or at least the level that their children think?
Um, I would say it doesn't happen real often. There's probably been some times where someone probably thought that someone needed a little bit more help, but it's almost always the opposite. And this is where people tend to project. They see their parents, I mean, think about it. Your parents, when you're growing up are like, you know, small g gods, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, that, you know, because they're like so big and so powerful and so whatever, that tends to carry on, you know, throughout our lives, where we kind of think, oh, they're able to do that. You know, we sort of think that they can do more than they can do. I will say, and this is just an interesting thing, and I probably have said this before, but it there are different motivations that happen. You know, I do see that where kids are motivated for safety for their family members, but even yet they have a distorted view. The people themselves that need care are wanting independence, and so in all cases, you know, the value proposition is a little bit different for it, and for you know, getting care where you're getting outside help. You know, we are to the kids seen as a means of helping with safety, with with the person themselves. If they see our benefit, the benefit they're going to see is that we help them achieve the independence that they want. Um, but even yet, I think kids tend to have a false view of their parents, distorted. And that's where I think it's really important, whether it be us or a social worker or someone that can look in from the outside and say, yeah, this is the amount of help that you need. One of the things that I will frequently ask someone is, what did the facility, let's say they're in rehab, what did they say you needed? Have you asked them what their assessment of how much help they're going to need in going home? And many times, you know, that they're willing to say it, and sometimes they actually make it very clear, you have to go home, you know, with 24 hours of help. We're not going to let you out of the building without that. And other times they're not as, you know, some of the facilities aren't as forceful in saying you must have this. But I will say that the that that asking is really important, because then you're getting an outside professional look and saying, this is what I see, this is what is needed in this case from, you know, a third party that doesn't benefit. And that third party, you know, I think oftentimes the best is the PT, the nurse,
Sure.
in the facility. They have nothing to gain from suggesting that you might need extra help, you know, or less help, you know, in certain circumstances, and probably will be not as likely to have the distorted lens that I say that kids oftentimes have, and definitely the patient themselves oftentimes has, you know, in this case. I'd also mentioned, you know, when I kind of at the beginning, I said that there are some programs out there. And if someone has a chronic condition, let's say they have MS, or they have Parkinson's, or they have Alzheimer's, you can look and see if there are any grants that are there. Sometimes they'll have grants for respite money or other things. Some counties have hours that they'll provide for their folks. You oftentimes have to qualify, you also have to sign up for it. But if you do qualify, that might give you some hours here or there. The other thing is, like the area agency on aging, Western Reserve area agency on aging has some respite money sometimes that they do, and they periodically open these grants. This is really meant for that caregiver that's trying to take care. Let's say it's a husband trying to take care of his
Sure.
wife and he's burned out. And so they'll give a temporary grant to help relieve some of that pressure so that we can come in. So I know in the past they've done that. So what I would do is look at these different resources and see if there's anything there that you can draw from. Sometimes people can also do things like reverse mortgages. That sometimes that's can bring value to be able to pay for care and such that you're not having to pay, for the mortgage that you're taking out, and so it's a way of freeing assets. The military had mentioned before has stuff for veterans specifically. So if someone was a veteran during wartime, they can get a benefit, possibly called the aid and attendance benefit. And the way the aid and attendance benefit is they take your income, your assets basically are kind of in the calculus. And then what they'll do is they'll take off the cost of care from your income. And a lot of times people who would not qualify suddenly qualify because of the fact that their income has dropped down. And so they will basically prop that up by, granting a certain amount of money. And, I think it's around $1,700 to $1,800 a month that oftentimes people can qualify. Widows also of people who served during a wartime era can also qualify for that. The VA also has hours specifically that they will grant that is direct care, that it comes directly from the VA. And so there are programs there. So there are certain programs that are out there. And here's what I recommend people do is look at the care that's needed, that first thing that I talked about, and then kind of reverse engineer. Start looking at, okay, what can we as family do? What do we need to have a professional service do? Can we get grant money to cover some of this? Do we need to pull in from, the reverse mortgage or do different things? And even in life insurance policies sometimes can be taken advantage of beforehand when people have done those, the traditional life insurance policies where it's built up this significant kitty of money. And sometimes people can qualify for, taking some of that money. Different programs, as I mentioned before, that if someone has a specific disease, they may be able to get some sort of a grant, for it. So it is rare that we're not able to kind of cobble together a way to get people the care that they need and still make it, affordable and provide the value. And this is the value thing of keeping someone in a safer environment and hopefully avoid the thing where the costs are through the roof. And one of the things that I've seen before is I do think that I've just seen many times where people have just been taken care of where I remember this one older woman that we took care of. She didn't have any family. And she literally was to her last, dollars, and she passed away. And she wasn't aware where she was at, but she was, and she was able to stay at her home. And so often I see where there's sort of this, I call it a grace, where people have this grace and they're taken care of, where it really does come together for them and they're able to spend their years where they want to be in a home setting.
Absolutely. And and you brought up a number of great ideas, because when you talk about these grants, there are grants for medication that people need
Hmm.
are taking advantage of even before they need care. Um,
Right, right.
those are ways of saving money. I know my husband's diabetic drug, um, it's just outrageous. Okay. And even though he's working and everything, he does fall under that guideline that he can get it through a grant. And so what we've done, we've taken a portion of what we would have paid for that, and we're putting it aside, and those
Mhm.
things that if you start thinking about early enough, um, getting the help you need, and it's out there for the asking. And you're right,
Right.
some people might not qualify, but until you try, you won't know.
Mhm.
Um, and I also believe that friends and family are willing to help out. I mean, they may not be able to give 24/7. But I remember when my grandfather lived with us, um, my mother's brothers and her sisters came over for so many hours during the week.
Yeah.
Um, and it was like, I'm going to come visit, I'm going to come visit grandpa. Okay. And if grandpa needed something, they took care of it. Um, so I think it's about time we all start helping each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And the the only watch out I would say with that and is that if you've committed to do it, it needs to be a true commitment. You
Exactly.
have to look like as if it was going to a job.
Right.
Um, and that's one thing I do oftentimes say to families, look at if you are not fully committed to do it, get the help in because it's easy to justify, well, it's just this Friday night that I'm not able to do it. And, you know, and then all of a sudden it just kind of pieces start falling through because people don't see it as a commitment.
Right.
Something else comes up. And so they'll justify not being there in those cases. So that when someone does say, yeah, I will do this, they really need to do it. And you actually made it a point that I hadn't thought about, but it's really a good one because there are ways that you can save in other areas for care. And that thought about medicines and the compassionate use programs or whatever, that you might say, if you start with the end, we need this amount of money because this is the care that's needed or whatever. Sometimes you can, again, reverse engineer, say, in a perfect example, even if someone wasn't, there are many times where people are on drugs that are like the newest and the latest drug. And there are so many generics now of good drugs that you can a doctor can easily substitute many times those older drugs for the newer drugs. And maybe it has this slight advantage for the newer drug, but typically it's a minor advantage.
Right.
Rather than a major advantage. But if the doctor doesn't get any pushback to say, hey, we're trying to save money, they'll go with the newest or the
Yep.
latest and the greatest, and part of that's just, I mean, that's what they're hearing about. They have reps that are coming in and talking about the newer drugs, and it's not a sinister thing. It's just that's being promoted. They're hearing about it. They know some of the advantages, and yet many times, we'll just say, instead of using, this crazy antibiotic that costs a lot of money, maybe the penicillin would still work,
Exactly. You got
and and because at one point in time the penicillin was the latest and greatest and
right.
this amazing drug, and sometimes it really does work not only well but really well in the circumstances.
Well,
So
I think we gave your listeners a lot of information. Um, and what I'm hoping maybe we can do next month is sort of post out there that if anybody wants to join the show, maybe we can talk about some of these things, uh,
yeah.
and start helping each other. So I think I'm going to start posting for the next show that we're looking for people to come online with us. They can
Mhm,
come on anonymously if they want, with or without their face even being shown. But let's talk
mhm.
about the needs, and let's see how, we can all help each other, because I think the majority of us would rather be at home than in a facility someplace. Even though there are some beautiful ones out there, I prefer to be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I appreciate the fact that we were able to talk about this. Hopefully, this will give people food for thought to be able to help plan for the people that they love the most and be able to make things work for them. So,
Great.
thank you.
Well, have a happy holiday. Easter is around the corner, and hopefully, the Easter Bunny will bring us all some good chocolate. Have a great day. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.